Okay, so to continue on, this type of question, the next three types of questions are only for the university level students. Okay, so what we've seen so far is that we've just done two different types of genetic word problems that show the law of dominance and recessiveness. So some cases where we find actually don't follow that pattern. Sometimes we can have two different alleles that are equally dominant. Okay, so that means that when we have a heterozygous individual, we don't actually have the dominant phenotype. We're going to get a third phenotype. So this is quite interesting, how these two equally dominant alleles for the same trait interact to form a third phenotype. Now that third phenotype can have an outcome of two different ways. So the first way here is incomplete dominance. Okay, so this is the case where we're going to have the heterozygous genotype is actually a blend of both dominant phenotypes. So this will make sense in just a second when we do a sample question. Okay. Okay. So you can see the setup is exactly the same with the traits and the parent phenotypes and the offspring and the Punnett square. Okay, so here we have color in snapdragons. So there's our trait. Let's put that right in. Okay, now take a look at the setup here. So what we're going to put here is that these are the three possible genotypes. Okay, so we can be homozygous dominant for R, homozygous dominant for W, or heterozygous, where you have one of each. Now notice there are no recessive alleles here. So we don't actually use any lowercase letters. So this part of the question is where we're going to differ a little bit from our simple monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. Okay, so in the question, let's see what it tells us. This question has to tell us that it's incomplete dominance, so we know what this guy, this heterozygous genotype, is going to be. So we have red flowering plants and white flowering plants, and they're going to combine to produce pink flowering plants. Okay, look at that. That's our blend. So the red flowering plants are going to be that R. So the capital R shows for red. That's going to be our red phenotype. Okay. And the white flowering plants, which are equally dominant to the red, neither of them take precedence over the other. That's going to be our white phenotype. So you can see here, so far we have two genotypes, right? They're both homozygous dominant, and we have two phenotypes. But now we have a third phenotype, because when we get the combination of one of each of these dominant alleles, we get this blended color. Okay, so the blend of red and white make pink. So we now have that new third phenotype, which is different than monohybrid crosses, which only have two. Okay, so this is what the blend is. Now, the next part is just literally pulling information from the question again. So determine the phenotypes, so that's why we have a therefore statement with phenotypes down here, of the offspring in both scenarios. So we have two scenarios, so we can see right here we have scenario one, and we're going to have another scenario as well. Okay, so we have a red flowering and a white flowering plant are crossed. Okay, let's see. A red flowering and a white flowering are crossed. Okay, so that's our first scenario. Okay, this is the next scenario right here. So our first scenario is a red flowering and a white flowering are crossed. So let's now put in what their genotypes are. So to be red flowering, you have to be homozygous R, capital R. And the white is homozygous dominant W. So you'll notice we're using two different letters here, which is also different from monohybrid cross, where we use just a uppercase and lowercase of the same letter. Now, when these two individuals produce gametes, this first parent can only give the same thing twice, 2 capital R's. And the second parent can only give the same thing twice, 2 dominant W's. So again, we'll put those parents' gametes into the Punnett square. And when we do the cross, right, because I've always put the R's first here, I'm again going to put the R's first here. So what we notice, let's take a look at this. All of our offspring in our first generation are the same. So therefore, the phenotypes of this cross of these two parents in scenario 1 give us 100% pink offspring because they are the heterozygous blended genotype. Okay. So the other scenario, let's try the other scenario here. I'm just going to erase this one, and we're going to try the next scenario. Ooh, this is fun. Okay, so now we have 2 pink flowering plants are crossed. So if we put pink here times pink, the pink phenotype is our heterozygous individual. So we have 2 heterozygous, which is our blended phenotype. And that means each parent can make gametes that are haploid, which have either the R or the W. So this is kind of like monohybrid. Then when we put these parents into the Punnett square, oops, R. So now we can see that we're going to get a little bit different ratio here. Okay, so this first individual is going to be 2 R's. Then moving downwards, see how I'm doing that here. Okay, and I'm always writing the R first. I'm being consistent. Okay, so that means that in this case, when I do this offspring up here, I don't want to put my W first because then it starts getting really confusing. So I don't want to do this. Okay, I'm going to still put my R first from this parent. Okay, and the last one will be 2 W's. Okay, so I can see here I have a red individual. So if I'm looking at this as a percentage where I have 4 options, that 1 out of 4 is really 25%. Are going to be red. And let's see, to be white, right here, 1 out of 4 are white, which is 25%. Okay, and the last 2, these guys here, 2 out of 4 are pink, so 50%. Okay, so that's how you would do an incomplete dominant question. Now, if we move on to the next type of question, let's do this here. Oh, where are we? Okay. Codominance. There we go. So codominance, think about when you're in high school and you elected the co-presidents of your high school. There was 2 of them because they both shared the job of class president equally. So this is the same kind of idea. So instead of having that third phenotype down here being a blend, instead it's going to be a mixture of the 2. So both of the first and the second phenotypes will show up equally in that heterozygous individual. So this would be like a rose that was pink and red on it. Not pink and red, but red and white on it. Okay, so let's see how this plays out in shorthorn cattle. So the trait here in question, the shorthorn cattle, we're going to look at the coat color. So this follows a pattern of codominance. So this is, again, where I have to tell you whether these questions are codominance or incomplete dominance, because you don't know whether it's going to be a blend or a mixture. Okay, so now I have a red bull and a white cow are crossed to produce this roan color, which is the heterozygous offspring. It tells you in the question roan is red and white. Okay, so we're going to do a red color and a white color. And in our previous incomplete dominance question, the example would have made a pink cow, but that doesn't make sense here because this is codominance. So in this case, that heterozygous individual is going to give us our third phenotype. That is roan, which is really red and white together. So this would be like a spotted cow, like a white cow with red spots on it. Not a pink cow. So the question now is going to ask us for the genotype ratio. So now we want genotypes, not phenotypes like the last question, of a cross between a roan bull, oh, that's heterozygous, and a white cow. So this roan bull is the heterozygous individual. So we have to put in that heterozygous combination, codominance, and the white cow. Now it doesn't really matter whether, for the genders here yet, it doesn't matter which one's the bull and which one's the cow. I'm just concerned with the phenotypes right now. So this first individual, this bull, can either give a haploid R or a haploid W in its gametes. And the second parent can either give a dominant W or a dominant W. Now you have to write them both, okay? Because this is like one diploid cell splitting into two haploid cells, so to speak. So now we just put those parents' gametes into the Punnett square over here, and let's mix them. So again, I'm always going to put my R's first if it's heterozygous. Okay. So we can see here that I'm going to have 2 roan and 2 white. So the question now is not talking about phenotypes, it's talking about genotypes. So you would have your therefore statement. Okay, you can write the word therefore, or you can put the therefore symbol. Okay, therefore the phenotypes, not phenotypes, sorry, the genotypes of the offspring are. Now the question didn't actually say, oh, it does say ratio, so let's do that. I haven't showed you that yet. Okay, so now we are going to put the 2 different options that we have for our offspring, and we're going to put that as a ratio. So we have a 2-to-2 ratio here, right? 2/4 and 2/4. But we need to reduce that to lowest possible ratio. So 2-to-2 is the same thing as 1-to-1 if we divide both in half. So you would get a half a mark if you left it as a 2-to-2 ratio, and a full mark if you reduced it. Okay, so that's how you do a ratio. And so I'm going to stop the video now, and then the next video will be